You're listening to the REI Marketing Nerds Podcast, the leading resource for real estate investors who want to dominate their market online. Dan Barrett is the founder of AdWords Nerds, a high-tech digital agency focusing exclusively on helping real estate investors like you get more leads and deals online, outsmart your competition, and live a freer, more awesome life. And now, your host, Dan Barrett.
Hey guys, welcome back. You're listening to the second part of last week's episode. Let's jump back in.
You mentioned something that I think is really intriguing, which is you were trying to shorten the distance between somebody getting information and somebody taking action, right?
Yeah.
And I think there are, you said like, oh, there are too many programs. I was speaking earlier today with someone who wrote a book, and I do want to talk about your books actually, but there's someone who wrote a book and he said, the average person reads 9 pages of a book a year, right? It's like, well, it's just, they don't read the whole thing. He's like, most people aren't getting through the whole thing. So like, how do you get people to take action? Because I think one of the things I really like about you, and I have kind of followed your career from afar, is like, you really care about having an impact on people, right? It's not just about get as many people in as possible, sell the course, and then see you later, pal, right?
Right.
So how do you get people to take action when that action might make them anxious or uncertain, or they might view it as a risk? How do you think through that as a coach and a mentor as a leader?
Yeah, good question. Most of it's not real estate related. Like, again, we just got off that mastermind call, and I ask people at the end for final thoughts, we call it. Like, what are you thinking? Give me a word, give me a sentence before we get off.
Right.
And most of them said in some form, geez, what I really like most about this community and that group in particular, it's the higher end group, is that it's not just about real estate. Because if it was easy, Dan, as me going, hey, take the course, everybody takes the same course, why do they not come out as fast? Because we all have baggage, skill sets, lack of skill sets, challenges, problems, fulfillment. We all have all that. You're not changing that. So we help them through some of that. At the very beginning, we're talking about their why. Like, what the heck are you doing this for? How committed are you? Do you need this like you need water tomorrow? This isn't for you. Or are you in this for a long-term commitment? We ask for a 3-year commitment, not contractually, not at all. We just say, look, if you're in this, you need to expect a 3-year run here. And I had Brian Tracy on my podcast, and he said, no, 7 years. He was adamant about it. He said, 7 years. I've been around for a while. You need 7 years before you're really good. So we piece these things together, their why, their business plan, get to know them a little bit, and then throw the community around them. So we're all on Slack. 150 of us, whatever. We're all on Slack. So it's not about me. It's about everyone helping everyone. And they know that everyone genuinely cares. That's cool to be around. That's different.
Yeah. It strikes me, right, that you were talking about your business culture, like the culture of your team, right? We were talking about the SWOT analysis and doing the 3 meetings and even the daily meetings when you're going through COVID. It's a real skill set. It's a very rare skill set to be able to build a community with a really strong culture. And it sounds like kind of that's what you did in your group, which is really amazing because you get the leverage of everybody's expertise, right? I wanted to ask you, because now which number book is this for you? Is this your 3rd book total, or is this your 2nd one?
We did our 4th about 2 months ago. Sell with Authority. It was like a spinoff of someone who did Sell with Authority. They wanted to chicken soup it, have someone else do it. So they came to us and said, we want real estate. So we did Sell with Authority for real estate investors. That was the 4th bestseller.
All right. So I have to ask about this. As a writer, I would call myself a writer, but like as a hobby, right? I don't write for work necessarily, but I do write quite a bit. And for someone for whom writing is quite the struggle, a lot of the time. First of all, I want to know why books. They're clearly a really core part of what you do. So why books in general? And 2, like, what is that process like for you now? Is it just easy and you kind of breeze it out? Are you up at 4 a.m, bleeding from your eyeballs over the typewriter? Like, what is that process?
Yeah, none of the above. So all of the above, right? Sorry.
It's probably good. It's probably good.
So they differed as we went and learned.
Yeah.
Right. As you can imagine. So the first one was literally me with I call it a coach, but it was the company producing the book. So he'd come on and say, talk to me. And he'd go through the whole thing, and then he'd send back to me what he gathered out of that, because it was all audio. He'd just transcribe it. And then I would edit. And that went back and forth for, I don't know, a year, whatever it was, 9 months. So that was good. That was with Advantage Books. They're now Forbes. But we figured out, okay, there's other ways to do this. So the second book, New Rules of Real Estate, was a culmination of, we took what we considered to be the top 24 interviews we did on our podcast. Those got transcribed, sent to a writer, then sent to me and the team. My son and son-in-law edited too. And so we made it personal, and then that got published. A totally different process. We own that. We self-published it, everything. The one we just came out with was neat because we said, all right, if being an authority in real estate, I don't care what niche you're in, being an authority is the ticket, and the reason we do the books, by the way, so I'll get to that. Because when you're the authority, the market gets wonky like it is, and these national companies are coming in, they're hit and miss, they go. The local buyers and sellers want what? The local authority. They want someone who they know and trust that could be the authority. The book does that for you. And so that next book we came out with, Sell with Authority, we actually took about 8 of our students and they did a chapter. Of course, we had the writers edit it, but they did a chapter about their life, their story, and how they built their authority position. So even though we self-published that, we actually included students. There was a little bit less work, but I'm told by a lot of people way more impactful. Even though it's not teaching the basics, it's more advanced. It was pretty impactful. So I hope that answered that. If not, I can do more.
No, I mean, that was an amazing answer. And I wanted to dig a little bit deeper on that idea of authority. You said one of the main reasons you do the books is for authority. For a long time, I have been really promoting this idea that real estate investing as an industry has sort of shifted from an industry where all you have to do is tell people what you do, like we buy houses for cash, right? That's all you have to say. Versus, just shifted into a market where the question that you are answering with your marketing is much more about why should I sell to you versus any of the other investors who are also buying houses, right? And so it becomes much more relational, becomes much more about, like I always say, like being a local celebrity, you're saying the local authority. So dig a little bit deeper, like why is authority important? And what are some ways that investors can think about building their own authority over time?
Yeah, that book does that, by the way, the fourth book. It literally says to the investor, here's what we did and here's how you can do it. Okay. But I think, why does it do it? I mean, because there's a perceived value there. It's your podcast, my book. Those are perceived value recognition out in the marketplace. And so at the same time, in my opinion, if you went through the process I went through, while you're doing that, you're sharpening your sword. You are literally building your authority while you're building your skill set, in my opinion, because you got to go over and over and over and over that material. You have to make sure it's properly done. You have to make sure it's properly presented as if anyone can understand it, et cetera, et cetera. I'll say magically it does that, even though you did a lot of work to get there. That makes sense?
Yes. Yeah. It's sort of like you are putting the time in almost up front with that person in their head, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. You're in a relationship with them. But what's your experience been like with the podcast? You had the podcast for quite a while now, I believe, right?
Yeah.
How has that helped you? What's been your experience with it? Obviously, this is sort of a selfish question, but I've been investing a lot more time and effort into my podcast. I'm getting a lot out of it. I'm a big proponent of the medium to investors, but I find that most investors are kind of like, well, I don't know what I would say or whatever, right? They kind of gloss over it. So what's been your experience?
I did too, by the way. I remember, and then I'll answer that question. I remember I was on someone's show. I don't know what year it was, call it 16. And he said to me at the end of the show, hey, do you have your podcast? I said, I don't have a podcast. Like, I don't have no clue what to do with the podcast. I don't know who would come. I don't know what I have to say. He said, call this guy. So I called this guy, and he's been producing my podcast and coaching me through it. This is the coaching thing again, since 17, I think, whenever we started. We were almost at 400 episodes.
Wow.
How important has it been? This is actually scary to think about. Almost every major JV or strategic partnership relationship that we have, we met through them being on my show or me being on their show. Wow. Like almost every, which is crazy because I meet you and we might not work together, but you might run across someone and you go, hey, it's a really cool thing. You might want to call these guys over at Wicked Smart. And it just grows. Right. Crazy. Like example, Dan, we have a relationship right now. We just signed a new strategic relationship. And it's with a gentleman who has a very large community, bigger than ours, but similar culture. But they do fix and flip. And when the market changed, they went, it's gonna kill them. So 2.5 years ago, he was on our show 2.5 years ago.
Right.
So Zach, my son, had kept in touch with him. He credited Zach for that. And he came to us and said, let's talk. So they flew in, and we now his community is able to access our community. So what a cool thing that is. And so you just never know.
Yeah, it's, I always say, right, like I think people think of podcasts as, oh, the goal is to get a big podcast and then get like sponsors and have like ad revenue, like Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan or something. And I always say like, no, like by far, at least for me, right, we're kind of like running a relatively small podcast, very focused audience, right? 100% of the benefit has come from the networking side effects of the podcast.
Agreed.
And it's just like, oh, I get to meet everybody. I get to know you, right? I was looking over my notes. It's funny because usually I have like detailed notes on everybody who's ever been on the show. I opened up the page for your notes, and I'm going to do this right now. This is literally what it says. You ready? This is what it says on your page. It says, there's a May 20th, 2020 podcast interview with Chris Prefontaine. Super nice guy, great interview. That's what it said. That's all I wrote at the time. But it's like, but just the ability to be able to reach out to someone and say like, hey, I'd love to just learn more about you and do this in a way that benefits you. It's such an easy way to grow relationships, and
it is.
Network. I think it's awesome. And now you're telling me about creative financing, and like, I'm going to go download all your stuff after the show, right? Like it's going to benefit me directly. I just think it's such an underutilized.
There's something else built in inherently that you just brought to my brain. And that is, again, on that mastermind call I was just on, my wife gave me an idea to give them. And I said to them, last week I call it a rant. I do a video for them every week. And I said to them, why don't you, instead of worrying about getting the house under contract, why don't you this week and forever focus on what the heck the seller is telling you their problem is and really care about it. That's what I told them.
Yeah.
And my wife said, well, why don't they go even further? Why don't they do what I hear you do, which I didn't know I consciously did. And that is, when people say to you, they have this problem or that challenge, find a resource to help them. Like, be a connector and help them. And so I shared that with them today, and it was another light bulb. And my wife, Kim, said, you do it all the time, but I didn't realize it. So I said to my community, if you don't know the answer, then go find it. So what you and I get to do in the podcast is indirectly, by having organic conversations, help the listeners, because we are dishing out resources and we're having a live chat. I think it does that. And then when you do that, it comes back energetically. I think that might be a little far off for people, but
no, I mean, I think that's absolutely the case, right? Because even if you just think about it, it's like what we're saying, like, you know, it's like the sales truism, right? Where like people do business with people that they know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
Well, nothing lets people know you better than having them listen to a podcast with you for like a year. Because they get to know how you think, they get to know how you act, you know, they see you, they don't have to believe, you know, whatever sales pitch you're putting out. They can see your actions and judge whether they line up with the you know, what you say you're going to do, right? I think that's extremely powerful.
Want to find motivated seller leads online, but don't know where to start? Download our free Motivated Seller Keyword Report today. AdWords nerds have spent over $5 million this year researching the most profitable keywords for finding motivated seller leads. And you can grab these exact keywords when you download our report at www.adwordsnerds.com/keywords.
All right. I want to just touch base real quick because we're coming up on time and I don't want to keep you super late, but I do want to talk a little bit about what you are doing in your business moving forward. We've talked a bunch about creative financing. And again, folks, if you are curious about this, it's smartrealestatecoach.com. You can go there. There's a whole bunch of stuff, but also you can go get these free books at wickedsmartbooks.com/Dan. So there's a ton of knowledge there. We've been talking about creative financing, but I'm curious, like, what is your strategic plan for the next year or 2 years? You don't have to get super specific, but what is on your docket for things that you want to do inside your business?
Sure. I'll share some things that are happening this Monday that'll be announced, and this will go after this. So yeah, good. So coincidentally, with Elite, we set a mission in December of 17, so essentially 18 on, and it was a 5-year mission. So we are at the end of the mission right now. Yeah. And so we've been working with Dan, who we met through Elite, speaking of connections, and he comes in, he facilitates all the offsites. So this offsite in December for 23 will be a 3-year new mission. And for me, it's exciting because unlike 5 years ago, where I literally was sitting in a room and I brought it back to my daughter, son, and son-in-law, that was our team and a bookkeeper. Now we have a core management team that has risen to the point where they're running things. And my son-in-law, Zach, in partner, is taking over my CEO position. So I will gladly tell you, they're running with the mission starting in January. Like, they own it. And they're gonna, but it will have to do with the same culture now, which is transactions. Our whole mission for 5 years is can we get to 500 transactions with students? It's not about, can we sell X units? So it'll focus around that some more in their experience, because when you provide a good experience, nobody leaves an experience. Nobody leaves a relationship. They'll leave a business. They won't leave a relationship if it's done right. And so our mission will focus around gluing that together and making them successful. And why would anyone leave that? Think about it. Cool relationship, cool community, you're doing deals? Okay, why leave? Well, that's what the mission will be around.
Wow. I love that story, first of all, because I also, it's like this program, Elite Entrepreneurs, that we both kind of have experience with, like, we also have a 5-year goal, right? But we just set ours this year. So it feels very far away.
It does.
Like, to see you at the end of yours is like really exciting in a lot of ways. I'm curious, how does that feel? So you are stepping out of the CEO role, right? And I know you have this like incredible team. Like you mentioned this before in the previous podcast, you're working with your family and everything, but how does it feel for you? Is it purely exciting? Do you feel some kind of wistfulness for it? Like, how does that feel emotionally?
Well, we've been planning it for like a year and a half. So I can tell you, it was super hard a year ago. They wanted to do it a year ago. And I just been like, go, I'm used to doing everything. So I was a micromanager. Yeah. As soon as I started letting go, and again, we're back to coaches. My coaches hammered me on this for 3 years prior to us talking about it. And that was, you gotta let them do their job. You gotta let them do what they're good at. That's what you hire them for. And as soon as I started letting go more and more, they grew like crazy. Yeah. Because that's our culture. So I'm ecstatic for them and for my wife and I to have some other paths.
I mean, that is very inspirational to me, because I feel like you're at the end of a journey that I'm just starting, right? Which is awesome. So, but what's next for you? Are you just kind of taking a break? I know you have got the coaching and everything. Like, what's your next, like, for you personally? Yeah. You don't have to give me like a specific goal with KPIs and all that stuff, yeah. But what do you view as your next chapter? Yeah,
real simple. Because I obviously gave it some time. So company-wise, 2 things. I started years ago doing deals. That's what I like doing. My son loves growing. I like doing deals. So I'm working now with just the 2 highest levels in the company, me personally, with the students. The 2 highest level. One level has 4 people in it. The other one has about 25. That's who I'm working with, because they're super, super high level, high driven, and committed. So that's 1. 2 is outgoing interviews like this in my own show. So in other words, podcast related to our earlier chat. I love doing that, number 1. And number 2, I know that it provides a lot of value for the company just with me doing it and then making that connect. And it keeps me on the cusp. And I love these conversations. So those are the only 2 things. Obviously, I've got other stuff I got to think about in the company financially, but those are the 2 things that I personally will be doing. And then on a personal note, we've got a 30-year goal. We had a 30-year goal of building a home in Vermont. It's happening as we speak. I'll be done in May. So creating experiences there for the grandkids. We have 2 in the family up in Vermont.
Wow, that's amazing. So you literally was a 30-year goal to build this house, and now it's happening?
We've talked about it through all the ups, downs, trials, tribulations, and yeah, we're halfway through.
All right. Well, look, you're living my dream life. I have the 30-year goal for so
then we need to chat more again to our earlier talk. Yep.
Oh my God, dude. That is so amazing. I would love to just keep talking about it. I don't want to keep you too long. I don't want this show to go too long. For people that are listening, I'm telling you, go check out, it's a wickedsmartbooks.com/Dan. You can go and get Chris's free book offer. He's got a bunch of stuff there. Like you said, Chris, there's like not even any shipping and handling, right?
No, it's not one of those free, but put a card in. No card.
So go check it out. wickedsmartbooks.com/Dan. Of course, you can go to smartrealestatecoach.com as well to check out everything that Chris has going on, which is a lot. Where else do you want people to find you, Chris? Do you have social media, anything like that?
Yeah, we're on Instagram and YouTube. We post all those videos. If they want to listen to me for an hour, they can deal with that. We do have a free class. You mentioned it earlier. I think it's smartrealestatecoach.com/masters with an S, masters class.
All right, awesome. So we will have links to all of that stuff on the show notes for this week's episode at adwordsnerds.com/podcast. Chris Prefontaine from smartrealestatecoach.com. Man, thank you so much for being here again. This was really, really fun. I really appreciate it.
I love the conversation. I appreciate you having me back. Appreciate it, Dan.
That is it. That's it for our interview this week. Just a reminder, it is wickedsmartbooks.com/Dan. I don't get anything if you go there, right? I don't know. I'm not getting paid money or whatever. This is a free download, wickedsmartbooks.com/Dan, to download all of Chris's stuff. He's such a great dude. I really enjoyed my talk with him, and I hope you did as well. Look, if you wanted to catch some of the show notes from this week's episode, obviously you can do that over at adwordsnerds.com/podcast, where I've got notes for this episode and all of our past episodes. Cannot tell you how much I appreciate having you here. Thank you for listening, and I'll be with you next week. Cheers.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.